Some stories, they're really rooted in just one place, a single community. But they somehow carry this universal weight. It resonates way beyond where it happened.
Yeah, they definitely do. They often remind us about the real impact of violence.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
loss and how hard it is to put things back together afterward.
For everyone involved.
So today, we're going deep into one of those stories, the Hamilton Avenue murders. It happened back on June 1st, 2006 in Indianapolis.
Right.
We're going to be looking at insights from a really compelling source, the Hamilton Avenue murders, a house of death, just trying to understand this tragedy that really changed a neighborhood forever.
Yeah.
Our goal here is to unpack the details, the awful details, get into the specifics of the crime, the motive, which is chilling, and then explore the ripples,
Yeah.
what it meant long-term for the city.
And it's such a stark example of what we sometimes call collective trauma.
How so?
Well, it's where an event, maybe it doesn't dominate the national news for weeks, but locally, it embeds itself so deeply.
Right into the community's memory.
Exactly. It can actually reshape how people talk about things, even public policy, for years after. It really shows how that impact just lasts long after the news crews leave.
That makes sense. And that lasting mark, it definitely started with what happened on June 1st, 2006. Let's get into that, the scene itself, what investigators walked into.
Okay.
It was a Thursday morning, pretty quiet, typical residential street, Hamilton Avenue on the east side of Indianapolis. But inside one house, just a small, kind of unassuming place.
Yeah.
That quiet wasn't peaceful. It was permanent.
Yeah.
They found 6 people dead, shot execution style.
Horrific.
4 adults and 2 children, and the details that came out later, just grim. Some were shot while they were sleeping, others apparently cowering.
Just awful to imagine.
And the thing that immediately struck investigators, perplexed them really, was no sign of forced entry, no sign of a struggle.
Nothing.
It wasn't like a chaotic home invasion. This felt different, methodical, cold-blooded.
Exactly. And the initial finding, the lack of forced entry, no struggle, that was crucial.
Why? What did that tell them?
It told police right away this probably wasn't random, The source describes the scene using words like execution, bloodbath.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a crime scene. It felt like it was designed to send a message, a really deliberate, terrifying message.
Wow.
You can only imagine how unsettling that must have been for the whole city, not just the people on that street.
Absolutely. And then you look at who the victims were. It makes it even more tragic. Inside the house, there was Raymond Smith, Sugar Ray, people called him, 30 years old, described as, friendly, quiet guy.
Right.
But there were also rumors that he was maybe a low-level drug dealer.
Okay, so that connection was there early on.
Yeah. Then his girlfriend, Valerie Smith, and her brother, Darrell Hall.
Also victims.
Yes. And a family friend, Keith L.
Yeah.
He'd apparently just stopped by that night. And he was killed too.
So terrible. Just wrong place, wrong time for him.
It seems so. But the part that's just profoundly disturbing is that nobody was spared, not even the children. Dion Smith, he was 5, and Deshaun Smith, just 4 years old.
God, the children, and that just emphasizes the human cost, doesn't it?
It really does.
I mean, any loss of life is tragic, obviously, but when innocent kids are caught up in something so brutal, it speaks to a level of cruelty that's just hard to comprehend. Leaves everyone scrambling for answers. Why? How could someone do that?
Which leads right into the big question investigators had, right? If there was no struggle, no forced entry, and it didn't look like a robbery, what was the motive?
Exactly. That was the puzzle.
The turning point seemed to be when they confirmed, okay, the house wasn't ransacked. Valuables are still there.
Right. Not about theft.
So this wasn't about grabbing stuff and running. This is where the investigation really pivoted, started digging deeper. What did they uncover about Raymond Smith? What shifted the focus?
Well, the source shows they didn't just guess. They were methodical. They interviewed people he knew, looked at phone records, followed up on street talk,
Standard procedure, but crucial here.
Absolutely. And because those valuables weren't untouched, it pointed away from random theft and, well, more towards a targeted hit, probably connected to the drug trade.
Okay.
So a motive started to take shape, linking back to Smith's alleged drug dealing. The idea was maybe he owed money, maybe to some, let's say, dangerous people.
And the execution style.
Suddenly made a horrible kind of sense. What happened wasn't just murder, it was meant as a message.
A terrifying message. And pretty quickly, 2 names surfaced as suspects. Desmond Turner, 28, known in the local drug scene, apparently had a violent history, and James Stewart, 30, Turner's associate, also had a record.
Right, they weren't random strangers either.
No, they knew the victims, which makes it even darker somehow.
Yeah.
The reaction from the public, as you can imagine, immediate, visceral fear, especially the fact that children, sleeping children, were killed.
That detail just resonated with everyone.
The mayor at the time called it an unspeakable act of evil.
Oh.
The city mobilized, huge manhunt, police everywhere, even federal agents got involved.
A massive response.
And they caught them relatively quickly, Turner within days, Stewart not long after.
And those arrests, they definitely brought some relief. You know, people were anxious, wanted them off the streets.
Of course.
But the source uses this phrase. It says, there was no comfort.
No comfort. Wow.
Yeah, it's powerful, right? It highlights that, okay, justice might proceed, but it can't undo the brutality. It can't erase the fear that settles in.
Especially with this kind of crime.
Exactly. The source really drives home that the nature of it, killing those kids, it created this wound that just making arrests couldn't heal.
That makes total sense.
No, so.
Because the legal outcomes, while they bring a certain finality, they couldn't possibly heal those wounds.
No.
So Desmond Turner, he was charged with 6 counts of murder. He was facing the death penalty.
Right.
But in 2009, he took a plea deal. Life without parole, but spared execution. And James Stewart, prosecutors argued he was just as responsible. He got 6 consecutive life sentences.
Effectively the same outcome, locking them away forever.
Yeah. But here's a chilling detail from the source. Neither of them apparently showed much remorse during the trials.
That's right. Yeah, that's a crucial detail. It's not just about being sorry. Psychologically, that often points to something deeper, maybe a profound lack of empathy, like in severe antisocial personality disorders.
How so?
Where the perpetrator might see other people not as humans with feelings, but just obstacles or tools. It makes these brutal acts seem coldly logical to them, even though they're horrifying to us.
Chilling is the right word. And for the families.
Yeah.
Especially the parents of Dion and Deshawn.
Yeah.
Justice, even life sentences, must have felt like, well, the source says, a hollow concept.
How could it not? It can't bring their children back. It's a form of accountability, but not restoration.
And these murders, they didn't just devastate the families. They really became this potent symbol in Indianapolis.
Of senseless violence.
Yeah, but also kind of a rallying cry for change.
That's right. Community groups stepped up. There were vigils. People started talking more intensely about gun violence, about drugs, about the systemic issues like poverty that kind of underpin some of this.
That sparked conversation.
A really difficult but necessary one. There's this image the source mentions. 2 small coffins buried side by side.
Oh, heartbreaking.
It reminded the whole city just how thin that line can be between the dangers on the street and the innocence inside a home. How quickly things can shatter.
A devastating reminder. And what about the house itself on Hamilton Avenue?
Well, more than a decade later, it's gone.
Gone.
Demolished. The source describes it as a ghost erased from the map.
Wow. Erasing the physical place.
Yeah. But while the building is gone, the story, the pain that remains, it echoes, you know, for the families, obviously, for the police officers who worked that horrific scene, and for the whole community that had to process this mass murder that maybe didn't make huge national news, but it changed countless lives there forever.
So looking back at our source, the Hamilton Avenue murders, a house of death.
Yeah.
The core takeaway isn't really about a drug turf war or some big heist gone wrong.
No, not primarily.
It seems it was about control, power, fear, and just how fast lives are extinguished when those forces collide so violently. 6 people went into that house that night.
And none came out.
Just devastating.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? What does it truly mean when a crime like this, apparently driven by power and fear, just wipes out an entire household?
Yeah.
Blurring that line between the streets and innocent lives so completely. And maybe more broadly, how do we as a community anywhere really acknowledge the echoes of these local tragedies?
Especially when they don't grab the national spotlight for long.
Right. How do we remember and learn from them? That's something profound to consider, I think.
It really is a powerful thought for you, our listeners, to reflect on. How does such a specific, awful event keep shaping the conversation about violence, about community safety, long after the initial shock fades?